Hello and welcome to Indus News with me, Usman Lone. Well, we begin this hour with our top story, and that's in Afghanistan, where the Taliban have freed 10 Afghan soldiers days after a prisoner exchange with the Afghan government. The International Committee of the Red Cross says it facilitated the soldiers' release. It said the security personnel have been handed over to authorities in Helmand province. Earlier, the Taliban released American and Australian university professors in exchange for 3 senior commanders. The Afghan government said the prisoner swap aims to restart talks with the Taliban. Pakistan's Foreign Office says the humanitarian crisis in occupied Kashmir is getting worse due to the continued military lockdown in the valley. Speaking in Islamabad, Pakistan Foreign Office spokesperson Mohammed Faisal said Kashmiris have been under a communications blackout for the last 110 days. He said Kashmiris aren't even allowed out to offer Friday prayers at mosques. Faisal demanded the immediate release of all political prisoners in the valley. He also welcomed the US Congressional Committee's public hearing on Kashmir. Faisal said Pakistan recognizes the US Congress efforts to improve the situation in the occupied valley. India has admitted arresting over 5,000 Kashmiri politicians and activists from the occupied valley since it stripped the region of its autonomy. Indian State Minister Kishan Reddy said arrests were made as a preventative measure. The minister claimed over 609 Kashmiris are under arrest as the rest of them have been released. But local Kashmiri media rejects that claim, saying thousands of people, including women and children, are being held in Indian jails without any reason or charge. In Iraq, 4 more people have been killed in anti-government protests in Baghdad. The death toll has now risen to over 300. Medics say 38 others were wounded in the clashes. Hospital officials say the wounded protesters suffered injuries from live ammunition and rubber bullets. Since early October, Iraqis have taken to the streets to demand basic services, economic opportunities and an end to corruption among the country's political elite. And sorry, it's not 4 people dead, it's now 7 people dead in the latest reports. The International Atomic Energy Agency says Iran should cooperate with it in order to resolve issues regarding uranium enrichment. Speaking to the agency's Board of Governors in Vienna, IAEA Chief Colonel Foruta said the agency is monitoring Iran's nuclear program. He said the IAEA detected natural uranium particles at an undeclared location in Iran. IAEA and Iranian officials will meet in Tehran next week to discuss the matter. Iran's nuclear program was slapped with US sanctions after Washington pulled out of the 2015 nuclear deal last year. In Syria, 21 people have been killed in an attack by government forces in Idlib. 40 others were wounded in the attacks carried out from the Mount Azan base in Aleppo. An observation group said 10 children were among those killed. Meanwhile, state media reported 5 civilians were killed in a strike by Turkish forces in Raqqa. It said Turkish aircraft shelled residential neighborhoods in a village just outside Tal Abyad city. In the last year, over 1,300 civilians have been killed in attacks across the country. Well, the United Nations says over 650 children have been killed in Syria this year. In a report, UNICEF said 5 million children are in need of humanitarian assistance across Syria, including over 2 million internally displaced children. It said 250 children are being held in detention centers to which the watchdog has no access. Idlib is the last major rebel-held bastion in Syria after 8 years of war.
Nearly 28,000 children of foreign fighters or children allegedly associated with armed groups from more than 60 countries, including almost 20,000 from Iraq, remain trapped in the northeast, mostly in displacement camps.
Turkey says it's killed nearly 1,200 terrorists since the launch of the country's anti-terror operation in northern Syria, while in northern Iraq, 158 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, called the PKK, have been killed in Operation Claw. Turkey's defense ministry said it will continue to take action to protect its sovereignty. Ankara holds the PKK responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in Turkey. In May this year, Turkey launched Operation Claw against the PKK in northern Iraq. Israeli police detained Jerusalem's governor Adnan Gaith from his house. Police have given no reason for Gaith's detention. Meanwhile, a report issued by a Palestinian organization reveals over 700 Palestinian children were detained by Israeli forces this year. The NGO's annual report said the children arrested by Israel face numerous rights violations. Over 5,700 Palestinians, including minors and women, are being held in Israeli detention facilities. Myanmar's leader Aung San Suu Kyi will lead the country's defense at the International Court of Justice in the Rohingya genocide case. Gambia will open proceedings on behalf of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. A government statement said the Nobel laureate will defend Myanmar's national interest. It said Myanmar hired prominent international lawyers to defend the country against the allegations. Over 2 years ago, 7 million Rohingya were forced to flee to Bangladesh after a military crackdown. Human rights groups say over 7,000 Rohingya Muslims were killed in Myanmar. The case will be the first international legal attempt to bring Myanmar to justice over the Rohingya crisis. Now in Pakistan, a delegation of Buddhist monks visited the Gandhara archaeological sites in Taxila. Wan Heng, president of the Jogya order, which is the biggest Buddhist order in South Korea, led the delegation. More in this report.
As part of its long-term plans to boost religious tourism, Pakistan is inviting Buddhist pilgrims from all over the world to visit its Buddhist trail. The trail starts from Khanpur and culminates in the Swat Valley, covering hundreds of Buddhist temples. The strategy has already yielded positive results by attracting several notable guests in just 6 months.
Pakistan is just like imaginary. We never imagined what the country would be really like. So once we arrived and meet the Buddha and all the Buddhist remains, then it's just such an overwhelming feeling.
The delegates were unable to conceal their emotions while at holy sites. They praised Pakistan for preserving the revered relics. The delegation said Pakistan was creating a heaven on earth by promoting interfaith harmony.
When I saw the fasting Buddha in the Lahore Museum, I couldn't hold back my tears. I would like to thank Pakistan's Honorable President and Prime Minister. Back in South Korea, people aren't even aware that this life-sized figure exists and is here in Pakistan. When I go back and tell people about what I've seen, I'm sure even more South Koreans will want to visit Pakistan.
Pakistan's archaeological authorities said the country is making efforts to promote religious tourism.
Khyber Pakhtunkhwa government is focusing to promote the religious tourism in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa by exploring the Buddhist heritage of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. You also know that Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, ancient name of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa was Gandhara. And Gandhara is almost a 2,000 years old civilization, which is the holy place for Buddhism.
The delegation will visit Takht Bhai in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which is one of the well-structured Buddhist monasteries in Gandhara district. After visiting Taxila Valley, the visiting delegation of South Korean Buddhist monks made an emotional and full of sentiments appeal to government of Pakistan to render their all-out support to turn all Buddhist temples in Pakistan functional to support the resident Buddhist community. Reporting for Indus News, Sumaira Khan, Taxila.
Well, we'll be back with more news from around the world right after this short break. Hello again, it's good to have you back. Now, Britain's Labour Party is launching its manifesto for next month's general elections. Speaking in Birmingham, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn promised a green transformation of the economy. He pledged to set up a fund for 300,000 new jobs and loans for people to buy electric cars. He said the Labour Party will also fund a pay rise for workers and will upgrade national infrastructure by taxing the rich. The manifesto also sets out plans to bring rail, water and energy into public ownership, as well as for more housing and free public transport. Corbyn also proposed renegotiating Prime Minister Boris Johnson's EU exit deal and putting it to a referendum. The Conservative Party says the manifesto lacks credibility because it doesn't say how Labour would vote in the new Brexit referendum. Now to South America. In Bolivia, and the movement of socialism has said former President Evo Morales and his Vice President Alvaro Garcia Linera will not contest in the next elections. The party also said it would not suggest members for a new electoral board. Bolivia's interim government has presented a bill to set up new elections and defuse street violence. If the bill is passed, it will annul the 20th October polls and appoint a new electoral board within 15 days. There's no date set for the new elections, but long-term leftist leader Morales and several other top MAS officials stepped down on the 10th of November. An international audit found serious irregularities in the election and cast doubt on Morales' victory. A Spanish rescue ship called Open Arms has rescued 73 migrants from a runga dinghy off the Libyan coast. The tightly packed dinghy was drifting at sea for nearly 24 hours. 2 children under the age of 5 were among those rescued. Most of the migrants are from Central and West Africa. Many of them were in a state of shock and suffering from burns from prolonged exposure to salt water and gasoline. The charity organisation is seeking to embark them at a European port. There have been 994 confirmed deaths so far this year on the 3 main Mediterranean migratory routes. Greenpeace activists descended on a petroleum refinery near Athens to protest against oil and gas exploration projects across Greece. Protesters hung from a large storage tank and chained themselves to the refinery's gate. Activists blocked the entrance to the Hellenic Petroleum Refinery in Asproparagos with a sit-down protest. Last month, Greenpeace sent a letter to Hellenic's board calling on the company to withdraw from exploration projects in Greece. They also demanded the company to review its strategy in line with the Paris Agreement to curb climate change. Greece's biggest oil refiner, Hellenic Petroleum, operates 3 refineries. It's licensed to search for hydrocarbons in several regions of the country. In Australia, smoke from bushfires has blanketed the skies of Sydney and Adelaide. The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, denies his climate policies caused the fires burning across the country. Morrison insists his government is doing enough to tackle global warming. Aerial pictures show Sydney and Adelaide being barely visible under the heavy smoke. You can see now, ladies and gentlemen, in your screens, firefighters trying to tackle the blaze and the thick plumes of smoke coming up in the skies. Health officials are warning people to stay indoors as the smoke reached hazardous levels, with bushfires burning in every region of the country, and Victoria and South Australia were the hardest hit. Amnesty International has called Facebook and Google human rights abusers. In a report, it said the tech giant's data collection model represents a threat for the world. In a 60-page report, the organization argued, despite the services that Google and Facebook provide, that it comes at the cost of the user. The group says Google and Facebook threaten a range of other rights as well, including freedom of expression and the right to equality and non-discrimination. Amnesty called on governments to legally guarantee people's rights. In its response to the report, Facebook and Google disagreed with the organization's conclusion and disputed the report's findings. Now, in other news, a British Nepalese mountaineer smashed a world record by climbing the world's 14 highest mountains, and he did it in just 189 days. And if you're not good at maths, that's about half a year. Now, the previous world record for climbing all 14 peaks was 7 years, 10 months and 6 days. So this guy did it in half a year. Let's see how he did it.
The 14th highest mountains in the world all stand over 8,000 meters high. 36-year-old Nirmal Purja served as a British soldier but quit earlier this year to pursue his mountaineering dream. He began in Nepal on April 23rd and completed in Tibet on October 29th. 8 of the peaks are in Nepal, 1 in Tibet, and 5 in Pakistan.
5 of us, all the Nepalese mountaineers, made it to the summit. And we made it not only for us, we made it for everybody.
Purja had a rotating team made up of only Nepalese climbers. They managed to rescue 3 other mountaineers during their attempt. Purja said finances was the most difficult part of his adventure.
In terms of job security and all these things, financial stuff, gave that away as well. Sold my house, of course, time away from family. Yeah, and the list continues.
So far, only 40 climbers have completed the challenge.
3 mountain duns.
A car show at London's Victoria and Albert Museum is celebrating 130 years of automobile innovation. The exhibition showcases a variety of cars, from luxury handmade ones to futuristic flying cars. More in this report.
The exhibition at London's Victoria and Albert Museum takes visitors on a road trip from the first ever car to modern concept models. On display is the 2-seater pop-up next flying car with a jet engine, incorporated wings and a cockpit seat. Alongside that is the typically designed old Graham car in pattern motor wagon number 3.
The car behind me is called Pop-Up Next. It has been developed by Ital Design as a future mobility solution. It is composed by 3 different elements: a passenger capsule, a ground module, and an air module. The whole idea is you don't own it, so it's a service you can purchase.
The exhibition presents 15 examples of different cars, accompanied by 250 examples of products, fashion, and graphics. The museum's curator, Brendan Cormier, says the show speaks of the impact and design of automobiles broadly.
We thought at the V&A, what we could do is take a look back at the history of the automobile, trace its impact across the 20th century, and understand how we got to the current situation we are in today.
Cormier said the exhibition marks the cornerstone of 20th century design. It will be open to the public from November 23rd to April 19th.
Well, we'll be back with news from the world of business and sports right after this short break. Welcome back. Now in business news, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank has approved projects worth over $500 million for Pakistan. The Minister for Economic Affairs Division, Hamad Azhar, says Pakistan's economy is moving in the right direction. Addressing the Pakistani Business Forum in Islamabad, Azhar welcomed the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank's role in Pakistan. The bank's Vice President, Lukiyeko Wariantu, said the bank aspires to work closely with all stakeholders and development banks. In the ongoing US-China trade war, US President Donald Trump says China is not stepping up to the level he wants to conclude a trade agreement. Trump says he's reluctant to strike a deal with Beijing because China has not made the right concessions. He was visiting Apple's computer manufacturing facility in Texas and said Beijing would sooner make a deal than he would. Trump said he's looking at exempting Apple from tariffs, but said it might be unfair to Samsung given the free trade deal with the United States and South Korea. President Trump has already threatened higher tariffs on Chinese goods if the country does not make a deal on trade. Now to the stock markets, and Wall Street stocks have openly marginally lower after mixed trade signals and the row between Washington and Beijing over the stalled trade deal. The Dow Jones index has dipped slightly. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq are also trading fractionally lower. In Europe, London's FTSE 100 has dropped after Royal Mail shares slumped over 12%. Well, it's 17 degrees here in Lahore, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that's all from me and the team here in Lahore, but don't forget, for the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Bye-bye.